Cup and the league all to be won. Everyone knows there's a job to be done, and with a team so fine, I'm proud they're mine. We'll be singing this song. For real bars from Birmingham Athletic, and now we are on song. For real bars from Birmingham Athletic, and we'll go marching on.
The Dunfermline Athletic Former Players Association podcast is sponsored by Starnut Apparel, affordable and stylish clothing born on the terraces. Visit their website, Instagram, Twitter and Facebook.
Welcome to the fourth episode of the Dunfermline Athletic Former Players Association podcast, Walking Down the Halbeath Road, where we will reminisce about yesteryear and the players who've been lucky enough to wear the famous black and white stripes. Thanks for all your amazing feedback so far. It's great to hear you're enjoying the podcast. We have more fantastic guests lined up in the coming months, so we hope you enjoy listening to their stories also. I'm your host, Mikey Motkiewicz, and on this episode we speak to a local boy who played for his hometown club. He made over 60 appearances for the Pars between 1995 and 1998, before joining Livingston, where he would become their all-time top goal scorer. This is a player who won promotions at every club he went to. So sit back, grab a Bovril and enjoy this one with David Bingham.
Kinley, a very experienced defender, but Dunfermline have it. Here's Moore. An opportunity for Bingham, and he scored! Inside a minute of the second half, 46 seconds of the second half, and the Dunfermline fans celebrate. Dunfermline are level. It all looked so comfortable for Celtic. They gave the ball away, the cutback from Moore, and the lovely turn and shot from Bingham.
David, thanks for joining us on episode 4 of Walking Down the Halbeath Road. How you doing, mate?
I'm good, Mike. It's I really appreciate you giving me the opportunity to come and have a chat. It was enjoyable catching up with you at the recent reunion, albeit you had a lot on your mind that day. It was a fantastic event, and credit to you and all the people that organised it. So looking forward to having this wee chat.
Brilliant. We'll touch on that season during the podcast, but you're right, David, that was a mega busy day, but enjoyable.
Absolutely.
But starting at the beginning, you were born in Dunfermline on the 3rd of September 1970, so just keen to hear about your childhood, really, and growing up in the town and memories of playing football, really.
Well, that was all we had back then, Mikey, and first part of my life, for 10 years, we grew up in Clyde Crescent, which is just at the bottom of Abbey View, near Limburn Primary School. And where we stayed in the cul-de-sac, so if you weren't out in the cul-de-sac, where you were most nights when the sun went down, during the day after school at weekends, over the backfields was just a big grassy pitch, and probably like many other parks in the council estates, it was like however many aside the area could sort of take, and you would come in for even primary school, you're getting home at 3:30, whatever it was, straight over the fence at the park, and it would maybe be 3 or 4 aside, and by tea time it had grown to about 15, 16 aside, and then you'd get the shout for your ma, dinner, and for that, sort of horse it down as quick as you could and then straight back out to make the most of as much light as you had. And I loved it, mate. We didn't have a lot back then. Like I'm from a bygone era, but even then, so it was pre-Daisy, mobile phones, most computers and things like that, and sort of satellite TV. But you just loved, if it wasn't football, it would have been golf or something else. But for me, it was football, and growing up in that was a great grounding. Sort of a lot of boys that I grew up with that went on to play at a good level of football, whether it be junior, amateur, things like that, But that was certainly my first. And it didn't matter what age you are. I mean, I was still at primary school, so maybe 10, 11, going up to guys, some guys coming home for their work at 17, 18. It was a tough school, but it was brilliant. And I look back on fond memories.
Brilliant. And obviously you said you were really keen on football as a youngster. Who did you play for as a kid?
Well, again, it's pre-pro youth, mate. So, and at that stage, there wasn't any under 8s and under 9s. The first organised football was under 12s. But funnily enough, couple of guys I was at school with, twins, their dad ran with a Cubs team, and it was no league, it was just sort of friendlies, eh? So we were all maybe 8, 9, 10, and Bill Houston, his name was, organised just games against sort of other sort of club sort of organisations. But it wasn't until, I must have been about 10 or 11, then I actually went out to play for Oakley. Oakley had a good name in the boys' clubs. And I think myself, Sean Strang, former Dunfermline player back in the day, and other boys that maybe didn't make it senior, but that went on to play sort of good level junior and that. So we played there for a couple of years under my coach, Hughie Beveridge, whose son Ali was in the team, and I actually went on to have 6 months at Oakley Juniors when I was at St Johnstone, and Ali was in the junior team at the time. Obviously, I think he was maybe a year older than me, Ali. So I kind of went full circle, but I spent a couple of years there, and I loved it. It was kind of obviously my first taste of organised boys' club football. We had a really good team, but there was obviously a bit of needle between Oakley and Valleyfield. They were the sort of two teams, and Davy Sinclair was a good pal of mine, Sinky. He was in the Valleyfield team, but they had some top players as well back in their days. And I think at the end, in fact, there might even just been 1 year, Mikey. I think at under 12s, the team was disbanding, and I went across to play for Salveson in Edinburgh. They'd come and looked at me, and I was young enough that I could stay under 12s because my birthday was in September. So I went and played under 12s with Salveson. And at the time they had a player in the team, but I think he maybe left after the first year, was Sandy Robertson, ex-Rangers, in that team as well. Maxie Christie, Terry's laddie, was in that team. I'm still good friends with Maxie. I think he's a manager at Bowness now. So there was good Canadian youth players back then. And again, it was the same age group as Al McLaren, who was playing with, was it Calvary Park or Royston Rosebery, I can't remember. So you can see that a number of players that went on to sort of have terrific careers, eh? And I spent a couple of years there, won pretty much everything the first year, and we were invited down to the Ayr International Tournament down at Ayr, and we got to the final and we got beat off Rangers on penalties, and a team boys like John Spencer, Neil Murray, Gary McSwiggan, so it was a kind of a top team, eh? And after that, I just felt I was relying on my dad to take me to training Tuesdays and Thursdays, which he didn't mind, you know. And as I say, I've got a lot to thank my old man for, because it couldn't have been great on the winter night trying to take me over to him. We trained at Heriot Watt on the old Black Ash, but he never moaned. He took me over religiously for 2 years, and I just thought it was time to come back. And a number of my pals under George Donaldson, who was the daddy, a guy that I latterly played at Forfar with, Greg, who's now married to my cousin, actually. So I ended up signing for them for a couple of years and thoroughly enjoyed it as well, and played out there. Training was nothing special. George was right into his fitness, and you look back at it and you're thinking, Christ, how the fuck did we do that? I mean, it was just run. But as soon as the ball came out, can you smile on your face? But it was just part of growing up, mate. And as I say, we loved it, because no many of us missed training, whether it be a Tuesday and a Thursday night. You can remember getting the portable floodlights were all hands on deck, setting them up for a 7-a-side pitch in the middle of winter. We had some good players, pretty successful team as well, but I think come to the end of the under-15s, I think George had maybe had enough, and then a number of us ended up signing with Inverkeithing under-16s, and I think it was Dougie McNeil. And I had a couple of years there, mate, with some of the same players, but some other players, and again, I enjoyed it as well. We were fairly successful. And then I sort of progressed again up to the under 8. So, beg your pardon, we stayed at Crossford to under 16s. Then we went 2 years at Inverkeithing under 18s, and then I signed for the under 21s. So, because there was nothing else for me at that age group, or at that time of my career. When you finish 18s, the next age group was under 21s, or it would have been all age football, whether it be amateurs or juniors or things. And I think I had maybe 1 year there.
See, by that point, David, did you have opportunities and trials to go with pro clubs? Or
I did, mate. Yeah, I mean, I trained with Dunfermline as an S signing, and a lot of the boys that I was training with during the holidays and that, like Strangy and Andy Williamson, all these boys that went on to form the nucleus of the superb youth cup winning team. Mike, at that time, I was just incredibly small. I was knee height a grasshopper. And at 16, all my peers seem to sort of be that bit bigger and stronger. And it's just life, it is what it is. But at the time, it's hard to take. But I didn't start getting trials until, I think it was possibly the under-18s. Might have been in the under-21s, but again, I was still 17/18. And again, it's perverse how, well, not perverse, it's funny how football can work out, because I remember being invited to train with East Fife. And this was in the old days when it was just the 3 leagues, and they were in the bottom league at the old Bayview. I think Gavin Murray was the manager. And in fairness, Gavin used to pick me up and drop me off, and great. And I remember having your customary 3 trial games, and one of them being at East End in the old Reserve League East on the Monday night. Boys like Shaggy Jenkins, Big Snowy Morrison, I'm not sure if Ian Heddle was playing, but there was a very experienced Dunfermline team and did well, but one of the other games was against a very good young Dundee United team at Bayview, and we were 5 down at half time. But so, and then Gavin had just said it wasn't what I was looking for, which again is disappointing at the time, because you're thinking, is it ever going to happen for you? But at the time I was quite happy playing for under 21s if it was there. My memory doesn't serve me too well, Mikey, but I started working in Edinburgh in the bank, so I had my work, and as I say, I was coming back, I was still training, playing at the weekend, and I just I thought, well, it's not going to happen now at that age, and it is what it is. I'll find my level, looking back, and then all of a sudden I got a request to go to St Johnstone on trial for a. I think I can't remember doing too much training. I think it was just games, and there was a guy in the first team. He was a local lad. I remember team boy Billy Spence. And I used to travel with Billy, because at the time he was either injured or he was out the team. So he was playing in the Reserve League East again. And I just happened to play up front with him, and we got on really well. And I think in the 3 games I scored a couple, set up a couple. And at that time, St Johnstone were a league above East Fife. And I got the offer to sign for them. And again, it just shows you, because one manager doesn't fancy it, doesn't mean that somebody else. It just wasn't what East Fife were looking for, or the current manager. And I couldn't wait. And I just thought it was a reward for all the hard work that I'd done. I mean, I always remember, and again, talking about how big a part my dad has played in the sacrifices he's made as I was growing up. I mean, we used to go to, and you're from Dunfermline, but you'll be familiar with the deathy in the public park where you slide down when it's...
Yeah, of course.
You get the size of the hill, Mikey. My dad, Monday and a Wednesday, Friday, when he come in for work, he'd have his dinner, and he would take me along there just to supervise me. So there's maybe 11, 12, 13, and just run up and down that hill umpteen times a night, just try to strengthen myself up. And it's wee things like that when you look back at it and say, well, I didn't need to do that. But I'm not saying it made the difference, because I think I always had talent, Mikey, but talent sometimes is just not enough. You need luck, which I did, because I got invited to St Johnstone, who was maybe just the type of player that they seen a place for in the future, Mm-hmm. But I did work hard, and as I say, as any number of players have, but sometimes hard work or talent is just not enough. You need to marry the two along with a good bit of luck, eh? So that would have been about late 88. So I think I just turned 18. But as I say, it happened when I wasn't expecting it, because I was quite happy just sort of soldiering on, training, working, playing football. But suddenly this opportunity came along.
Brilliant, mate. So you signed, like you say, you signed for St Johnstone. We've got it down as February 1990. If that sounds about right. The manager was Alex Tottenham and of Bert Payton.
Yeah, it might. I think... From memory, it may well be. As I say, I'm no great with figures, mate, but it could have been that, because 1990 were they not at by that time, were they not playing at McDermott?
I think they just moved to McDermott. No. Yeah.
Right. Well, Mikey, I was signed the season they won. That's right, because they had one season there in the first division. So yeah, you may well be right, mate. It was. I'm saying
89, 90.
Late 89. 90, yeah. So, as I say, if you've got that, unless it's come through Wikipedia,
No, we do our notes properly, mate.
I was only about that time, but I mean, I only played I think maybe a couple of games toward the end of the season, because obviously they were going for and ultimately won promotion with that great sort of fight with a good Airdrie side as well. But I enjoyed the Monday night Reserve League East. At that time, Dundee United, Aberdeen, Raith Rovers, they were all putting in, if it wasn't their second team, there was a third team. So the games were all really competitive. And it was a great grounding for players like myself that were new to it, because you had to work hard. And at the time I was there, it was Tommy Campbell was the reserve manager, who obviously latterly took me on to Forfar. So, yeah, from there, it sounds about right, mate, because at the end of that season, they went full-time. And that's when I left the bank the summer in 1990, so you're spot on, yeah.
Brilliant. Do you remember much about your debut for St Johnstone, Davy?
The first game I played for the first team.
Yeah.
I believe it. This might be my first start. I'm trying to remember it was my first. I might have come off the bench, but I played in the Forfarshire Cup final.
Correct. Spot on, mate.
Dundee, who had the likes of Derek Ferguson in the team.
Yeah. Bang on.
And again, there's some crowd there that day, considering it was just a Forfarshire Cup final, and Dundee had a really strong team. So, as I say, I think we ended up getting beat 3-2 or 2-1 or something
3-2.
like that. 3-2.
Yeah,
So, can I remember much about the game? Probably not. But I remember that was my full debut, and then I think at the end of the season, once we won the league, I got a start against Forfar of all clubs. It was the last game of the season when they presented with the trophy, because I think they won it the week before it here, when they won 2-0 down there, or 1-0. I think Paul Cherry scored. So that was that was my full debut. So that's 32 years ago. That's a long time.
As we said at the start, though, that was your first in your promotion history throughout your career. What was it like working under Alex Tottenham and Bert?
Sort of two different characters, like most managers, first team coaches are, but I got on well. Alec was probably, I wouldn't say Bert's more serious, but Alec was more serious, and especially with the younger players at the time, you're kind of finding your feet in professional football, especially when we went full time. And it's funny because it happens in such a short space of time, sort of playing under 21s, and I think the rest of that season I must have been sent out. That's when I went to play with Oakley Juniors as well. Again, at the time, toughen you up, sort of make you a bit more streetwise, and then getting the offer to go full time in the summer. And stupidly enough, I considered that at the age of 20, after 2 years in the bank, I took my time to consider it. I mean, I was thinking, what was I thinking about it? I think it was just maybe the practicality. Thinking the bank was a good career, and I'm thinking, well, I've had 2 years, I'll be able to go back to it if it doesn't work out, which ultimately I did when I left St Johnstone to go to Forfar. I had to go back part-time. But there was the first pre-season that year, and I think, was it that year, or I'm thinking, did they sign John Ingalls from Meadowbank, possibly? And I just happened to be sitting beside him, and this is maybe an indication about Alec putting markers down. It was a water break, and he was just going round Alec and asking players how they were, and he came to me, and obviously sitting next to big John Ingalls, I could probably make two of them, or he could make two of me, I should say. And he says to me, how are you finding it, Davey? I says, it's tough. And he just says, a couple of fish suppers and a couple of Guinness between you, and you're right as rain. And he moved on to Big Zeus, Big John, and says, how are you, John? How are you finding it in? I'm all right, Alec. That's great, but it's gaffer to you.
Brilliant.
So, put his marker down straight away. But because I was a young lad, we used to come out and back in the afternoon. It was Bert that would take most of that training. Boys like myself and a guy, Neil Bennett, who I played with latterly at Livingston, who did well at Alloa and Stirling, and a couple of other boys, big Bobby Mann as well, who I played with at Forfar. He left St Johnstone to go to Forfar just before me, and then we teamed up together again later in my career up at Inverness. So it was these sessions with Bert were good. Just it was mere on skills, but obviously getting used to, or trying to get you up to the physical nature of the game as well, and the speed of the first team players, because some of the guys in that team were seasoned pros, that had been at the club a number of years, or have come from other. Wee Murray come in for Hearts full time, so he's a big name. So it was a great grounding, but ultimately, I think young lads didn't get enough opportunities. I think Alec might agree or disagree with that, but there wasn't many boys that came through the youth, maybe Paul Dees and Philip Scott to an extent, but other than that, I can't think of too many that made or were given the opportunity. And I always found that when we made, and again, since you can understand, Mikey, when you get to the Premier League, the first goal is to stay there, and it still is for teams coming up, or majority of teams. But we found that even when results weren't great, there was a reluctance to play younger players, and it always seemed to be at the end of the season where, when the team was safe, maybe you thought it was easier to try and blood younger players in when there was no pressure. But there's pressure in all walks of life, and sometimes you'll find out what a young player or a more inexperienced player is made of when they're thrown into a kind of maybe a more pressurised situation. But again, it was still the first step on the ladder in my career, and as I say, without them, I probably wouldn't have had it. So it's always a club that I have fond memories as well.
Did you find it frustrating as a young boy, not playing week in, week out, or were you kind of just thinking, I'm just delighted to be a footballer and I'm full time and I've made it?
I think, yeah, initially, but as I say, from memory, at that time, Mikey, in the reserve league, they played opposite fixtures. So if the first team was at home to Rangers, the reserves were playing at Ibrox. And although it's great to play in these stadiums, it's not the same because there's virtually nobody there. And when things are going, you're thinking, well, when are you going to get an opportunity? It's kind of, if it's not happening for the more senior players or the more experienced players, there has a time where you've got to say, well, it's now or never for young players. And ultimately, that's why I took the chance. I think it was 6 months of my contract to go to eventually move on, because I think Tommy had since moved on to Forfar. He obviously knew me as a player because I'd worked under him. And I just couldn't see where a sustained run in the team was going to come. The club had maintained their status in the Premier League, but it just seems to be that it was only towards the end of the season you maybe get a run of games when things were safe. No, at the start of the season when you're sort of trying to finish top six or go for Europe or things like that.
You've got that hunger.
Well, I think and deep down, Mike, I thought, see the end of this contract, I'll probably get offered a new one anyway. So I was in a stronger position, sort of going back to part-time, that I could get a better deal. And in fairness, Tommy was brilliant with me. He looked after me and he made sure I got a really good deal from Forfar. So sad to leave, but ultimately, I think it was, and I think it proved that, Mikey, it was the correct decision that I made.
Yeah. So you joined Tommy Campbell at Forfar on the 8th of December 92. You play over 100 matches for the Loons. So you got your wish from going from playing no first team football to basically week in, week out.
Well, that's ultimately what the game's about, mate. Whether it's a level down. In that time, I think they were in the old second division Forfar. And when I signed that, I scored my debut doing it, I think at Palmerston in a 1-1 draw. So it was great to get off the mark straight away. And it was it added responsibility because, all right, there might be 400, 500, 600, 700 folk there watching, but it's their club, and it might be, back then it was like 50 quid a win, but at that time a lot of money when you're only part-time and then you're having to go in. So a successful week made it like a more profitable week. Now that's not the only way that you play football for, because you want to play at the highest level, but it gave you a purpose rather than, right, Rangers are playing St Johnstone, and I'm going away in a team bus, or I'm making my way through to Ibrox to play for 3 points in a league that, in the grand scheme of things, doesn't mean a lot. So that's all good and well when you're first starting out. But then when you've maybe been there a year or a year and a half, it kind of novelty wears off, and you want to play more regularly. And as I say, that's why I took the decision. And it was brilliant. And they're a brilliant club, treating me as they did with all the boys that was there, Kim, first class, and probably owe them, and Tommy personally, a big debt of gratitude for helping me on the next step in the ladder. It was a great move for me.
Yeah, in season 94-95, you won the third division Player of the Year, and I think you also won promotion that year again.
Yeah, and we had a fantastic haul at the end of the season. And Heads was there, Big Bob, Alan Morgan, who else was there? Scott Coppell was there, I think. Coppell was there. It was a real good squad. And we'd said at the start of the season, I think Heads had kept the kitty and we put money away just in case, because we had a real sense of we could do something here. And that day when we won it up at Dingwall, and we won it pretty early. We won it, I'm sure, maybe the end of March, possibly the beginning of April. So there was a bit of room to spare, and Big Bob, with a kind of trademark 35-yard free kick, spared my blushes because I had an absolute horrendous time in front of goals that day. Missed probably 3 great chances. But yeah, winning the Player of the Year was a fantastic achievement. And it was great because my dad was there to see it as well. Tommy and Brian McLaughlin, God rest him, who was Tommy's assistant, had invited him along because I think they'd got word that I'd won it, which sometimes can happen. And it was funny because my wife took me through it was in, I can't remember what hotel it was in, but her and her friend went across to a pub at the other side. There was like a pub quiz on, and I had a couple of drinks. There was a couple of boys there, but most of the boys were actually at Edinburgh Airport because we were actually flying out to Tenerife that night. So my dad got home with Tommy and Brian, and as I say, proud as punch when we won in it. And it was great because I got presented, I think it was McCoy's that presented me with Ali, which was really good. And it can fair play. I mean, you knew who I was, obviously maybe read up on my stats and that. And then it was a mad dash to Edinburgh Airport to catch up with the boys. And how a few of them got on the plane is beyond me because of the few story sights there. But it was a brilliant holiday, kind of really great holiday. Don McVicker, who had moved to Forfar, who was my captain at St Johnstone, God rest him, was sort of the joker in the pack, But it was a great week after a brilliant season, both personally, but more importantly for the club. And that was, I think, the very first third division. So went down a bit of history there as well. And that took us up into the sort of new second division. But it was a great season.
Superb. And then the following season, you played against Dunfermline in the League Cup and you scored in a 2-1 win.
That's right.
Do you remember that one?
I remember the goal because I think it was a cross came in from the left. I think it was McVicker actually. I can't remember, I can't remember whether it was a header or a side foot volley, and it put us one up, I think. And I think Greg Shaw might have scored for Dunfermline. I don't know who got the other goal, but I thought we played really well, and we're a wee bit unlucky. I think the result was a wee bit harsh on us, but we had some good players, Mikey, in that team, and it was on the back of that, I think, that the club went for me,
So you must have played well that day.
I did. Well, I did. I'm never one for bigging myself up. I know when I've played well, and I know when I've not played well, and I didn't need anybody to tell me, and I don't need anybody to tell me when I was shite. I know I've had enough of them in my career, but no, I played well that night, and maybe it was the stage, but the team played well that night, and as I say, I thought we were a wee bit hard done by, but ultimately, we got beat. Played well enough that we took the eye of Bert and Dick, and obviously Bert knew me from my time at St Johnstone, and it possibly followed how my career had went at Forfar. I'd been down, I think I was in the September, Mikey?
That was September 95, yeah.
Yeah, I think in the March that year I'd been down to Grimsby on trial. And they actually wanted to sign me. It was Brian Laws, the ex-Forest fullback, played under Clough, and Kenny Swain, ex-Aston Villa. But my wife would have got a transfer through the bank, but I just felt it wasn't the right move for me. At that time, Grimsby, believe it or not, were like top half in the current championship. I think they're in the National League now. So there's some good players there, So, but again, there was no guarantee that something was going to happen further down the line. I just didn't think it was for me. And I thought I was quite happy at Forfar. I wasn't looking to leave, because the club had treated me brilliantly. And at that stage, I can't remember, we just won the league. Or we looked as though we had a good chance of winning the league. So I wasn't in a rush to move anywhere. But then obviously the cup game against Dunfermline came along, and we played well personally, played well as a team. And then I think at the back of that, there was interest from Dunfermline.
Brilliant. Is that the first time Dunfermline had shown interest in you, or had they been sniffing about previously in your career? Or
no, but I don't know. But I mean, obviously, I was there as a young boy, like I mentioned earlier, Mikey, and I think it was when Ian Munro was in the club, and I can remember, and it was probably his way telling me that to stick in at either school or that, because I think we were getting changed after like training. It's obviously during the holidays. I can't remember his exact words, but he was got interested in how I was getting on at school. And when you're looking back, and I think his words were going, "Well, sticking at school, son." You know, just as a throwaway comment. Now, I might have been latterly reading too much into it, but he must have been. To me, he was saying, "Well, I don't think you're going to make it as a footballer." But that time, Mikey, I was quite small, because I'm talking maybe 14 or 15, and it wasn't until 17, 18 that I started to stretch. So, as I said, there might have been something in it, there might have been nothing in it. It's just when you look back, you're thinking, well, maybe he was trying to tell me something there, you know. And again, nice that I've been able to prove people wrong, you know, that I went on to have quite a decent career for someone that came into the game fairly late at the age of 18, But no, I don't. Other than that, I can't remember Dunfermline being sort of showing any interest. Not that I'm aware of. I do remember when I was still at Forfar, and Tommy had told me that Tommy Burns was the manager at Celtic. He'd inquired about getting me along to training, but Tommy's a big Celtic man, Well, says no, you can come and watch him any game, and so I wasn't best pleased when I found that out. Or even just to go and train would have been.
What an opportunity.
Yeah, and Tommy Burns was like an icon when I grew up. I was a Celtic fan back then, and watching him and the likes of McStay and were players that I sort of looked up to, sort of playing the game. So, but again, highly unlikely anything would have came of it. But it was maybe this as well. He told me getting a good bit later, You know,
it's like you say, you need that little bit of luck though in football. So you never know.
You know, another manager might have let me go down, you know, and I might have made a fool of myself. Who knows? You know, maybe he was looking after my best interests.
So going back to signing for Dunfermline, being a local boy, was that an easy decision in the end to join the Pars?
Pretty much. At the same time, Mikey, actually, St Johnstone showed an interest again, but there was a clause in the contract that should Forfar sell me, St Johnstone got X amount of the fee, so it allowed them to bid more than what any other club, knowing that they would don't have to pay like a certain amount. But I was never seriously interested in going back to St Johnstone because it hadn't worked for me. All right, it was a different manager. I'm trying to think who the manager was then.
Paul Sturrock, maybe?
Possibly. I can't remember. So 95 would it be?
95, yeah.
It may well be, but I never went to speak to them. The two clubs I was only interested because obviously I'd worked with Dick, with Bert. And I knew Dick anyway, you know, and I knew a number of the players that were there. And being a Dunfermline boy, I was actually, ironically enough at the time, my wife's from Edinburgh, so we were actually in the process of selling our house to move to Edinburgh, which was always the idea before we had a family. We were always going to settle in Edinburgh, again, whatever happened in life. So it probably was a good thing in a way, sort of getting out of the town. But yeah, it was only really Dunfermline that I was interested in signing for. But obviously, Forfar did, I wouldn't say play hardball, but obviously they were looking out for themselves in terms of with St Johnstone coming in. And I just had to say to the club that if they were going to be like that, I would just wait till the end of my contract and just move under the feet of my contract. But Tommy, as I say, Tommy was great with me, always was great with me. And whether he spoke to the club and just to make them not see sense, but just let them understand that my heart was to go to Dunfermline rather than go back to St Johnstone, where it hadn't really happened for me before. And I'm not a great believer in going back to somewhere where it really worked for you, whether it's under a new manager or not. So September, was it? No, just after September, whenever it was that I signed for Dunfermline.
Yeah. Do you remember much about your debut on the 23rd of September?
St Johnstone, wasn't he great? I believe it was St Johnstone, and I can just remember being 20 minutes I couldn't breathe. You know, it probably took me by surprise. I'd been part-time for the best part of two and a half years, Mikey, and having obviously had the benefit of a full-time pre-season that summer, when you're playing part-time, you're not aware of it because you still work hard, but ultimately our pre-season was Tuesday night, Thursday night, Saturday afternoon, sort of 3 days a week or 3 sessions a week, where full-time it's double sessions a day. So it's probably taken us a month to get the same amount of sessions as you would do in a week in pre-season with a full-time club. But the pace of the game just took my breath away. I got caught in the ball probably I'd need an abacus to count how many times I got caught in the ball that day. So it wasn't memorable from a positive perspective, but it was an eye-opener, and I think after that I did a lot of more sort of physical training or sort of endurance training a couple of afternoons a week to try and catch up, but I didn't feel I was really at the same level as the rest of the players till pre-season next year, which was unfortunate. And long spells at the team, but that was as much down to just poor performances as not being fit enough, and they're a good squad, so as I say, looking back, it was a rude awakening. I think it was it 1-1 that game or something of it? Was it a draw? So. Yeah. So maybe I'd be lucky if I lasted an hour, from memory.
From November, you must have been doing okay. You scored 2 in a 4-0 win over Clydebank. Don't know if you remember that one.
I remember the game. I can't remember the goals because was there no somebody else scored 2 goals?
I think Andy Smith maybe got 2.
I wasn't sure. And I'd remember I'd started doing warm downs after games, and I remember getting a shout because I'd come out after the game to do a warm down, getting shouted back up to do a bit of media work. I can't remember the goals, but it was probably, if it wasn't the last season that we won, the last season the games at Kilby, wouldn't it? Probably a ground synonymous with Scottish football as well. So yeah, it was probably one of the highlights of that season because it was I think it was February and it was curtailed. Yeah, so that was 4-0, but the goals escaped me, unfortunately.
What I was going to ask you about that obviously it's an iconic season for the club, and you played your part in that. But come the January, obviously losing Norrie McCarthy, what was your memories of that kind of time? Was it obviously a difficult time for everybody? Just
numb, because I'm trying to think. If we had a game, or had we had a game planned midweek, because I'm sure we were all brought on the Sunday, or it seemed, from memory, it seems a Sunday. Now, I can't recall if that was just the club wanted the players in to let us know the news, But no, I think we must have been training because obviously Norrie was late. Ultimately, he sort of died tragically. And it was just one absolute shock. Now, obviously, I knew Norrie because I frequented his boozer when I was at Forfar. We used to, on a Thursday night, we'd go in there for a shandy before going home. That's old school, proper old school.
Just one shandy.
I know. I got to know Norrie sort of on the social scene and Winker as well, And he's a larger than life character, Norrie, And I made the mistake one of the days sitting in his seat on the minibus going down to Pittreary. Nobody told me, And then he come up and he gave me that look and didn't click. And he looked again and I can't mind who said that. I says, "That's big honk seat." And I just thought, sorry. So I got up and I moved there. But I mean, you got used to the sight of him just in his Vitara Jeep just coming in at 5 to 10, all ready to go, just dumping the keys and then jumping in the minibus. And most of the days we were waiting on him, if it wasn't maybe any of the Glasgow boys or that. But it's just so tragic, because I mean, for anybody, and Mandy as well, I thought the club handled it brilliantly, and football in general, because they gave the fans, the players, the club time to grieve. But ultimately, we came back to play, and the outpouring of grief at the stadium, with the amount of scarves that were around kind of penalty box and his service at Warriston. I hadn't sort of gave much thought to Louis Armstrong song, but every time I hear it, it's synonymous with Big Norrie's sort of funeral at Warriston, And I just think the club and the players have got to take enormous credit to not just to finish the season, but to go on to achieve what they did against some good sides, Mikey, as well. I think it shows a strength of character right through the club that they were able to sort of not put it to side, but put it out their minds when they're playing and ultimately celebrate at the end of the season. And it was for Norrie, but it was for everybody, but a special place for the big man, because he was such a lovely guy and kind of a genuinely nice guy and a leader. Wasn't the best player in the world, but he didn't profess to be. But I tell you what, you missed him when he wasn't in your team, just a tragic when someone is taken so young, in such circumstance or any circumstances, but certainly like that, But it was a season tinged with obviously enormous grief and sadness, but it ultimately hopefully drove the boys on to achieve what they did.
Yeah, it brought the town and the football club together, didn't it? It was really special.
Massive. And you just look back at some of the games, and ultimately it's just on YouTube that you see them, but the crowds were phenomenal. I'm talking 13,000, 14,000. I remember the Airdrie game. Even I remember a Dundee United game. The crowds are 5 figures. What reason that's for, who knows? They were a good side. We were a good side, but you're playing against good sides. Was the standard better? I'd probably say it was, but I'm maybe a wee bit biased. But the fans are probably the best judges, because fans will be watching that and they'll still be going in subsequent eras. I think they got great value for money. There was a lot of good football played. There was a lot of terrific games. A 4-3 against Clydebank, the game against Airdrie, I think 3-3 against United. That season was just a brilliant season for sort of happy and sad reasons,
Yeah.
But on that night, after the Airdrie game, obviously getting the trophy, doing all the stuff upstairs, and then just migrating towards the town centre. Remember, parked in the Sport for a good bit of the time, and I think there was a picture, and I don't know, somebody posted me on a couple of fans. I think we Eddie McManus, he was one of them. It might even be wee Jeff, I'm not sure. Outside the Sport, it's kind of iconic time. And as you say, I've won a few sort of leagues, just being part of some great teams, but that's up there with them. The first one special at Forfar, don't get me wrong, because I was an integral part of that and played most of the games if I wasn't injured, and because it was the first, I don't think you can beat that, as a player. But that, for the reasons that we've just spoke about, what happened to Big Norrie, the strength of character of the team, and it wasn't easy, because I'd sat on the sidelines from sometime in February, done my cruciate. So it was probably easier to play in. And if you ask the likes of Mark Miller, Murray and all these boys, they'll probably say it was easier to play in, because you can affect it when you're on the pitch or you're involved watching for the sides. But you take your hat off to the players and Burton Dick, because to steer the club over the winning line with what went and happened in January,
definitely
was absolutely brilliant.
Superb. Who were the main characters in the dressing room at that point, David?
Oh, Big Norrie for the first part of the season, but Big Norrie, time for everybody, The Glasgow boys, they're just no quiet, But that's I've been part of clubs where there's Glasgow boys, and it's just in their nature to be boisterous and no quiet. So I think the boys spoke about it at the do at Carnegie, about the nights out that they had at the Gladger Inn, but not just for the players, but for the families. But I think it was possibly Dick that got Christmas parties at Dalgetty Sports Centre for the family, the boys who had families, for the kids and that. And it was a way for the kids to integrate in that as well. It doesn't harm every club, mate. Again, you're sort of fair credit to Dick for organising it, and the club for organising the nights at Gladger Inn, because they I think they helped sort of form that bond, And I'd played with Murray and Harry Curran up at St Johnstone as well, but I wasn't a regular at St Johnstone. They boys were, and latterly I played with Mark Miller at Livingston, but I played against him when he was at Brecon as well, But real top characters. It's kind of hard to single them out who was a bigger character, because I think we were fortunate to have a lot of strong characters, and that's probably part of the reason that the club won the league, is because the players on the park, they could police themselves. They knew what was at stake, and they didn't need a lot of coaching, because there was a lot of experience there, and the experienced ones were able to sort of coach and manage the younger ones on the park, without too much sort of intervention for the side. But a brilliant squad, a really terrific squad, and we had some cracking Christmas nights as well, and end of season trips in Magaluf as well.
We'll not talk about Magaluf.
No.
We'll keep that for another one. So obviously we won the league that year. It's a special year. So back to the Premier League. You had a difficult season that year. You had a few injuries, didn't you?
Mm-hmm.
Was that difficult for you?
It was. I think the way they set up, because initially I'm sure I started the season, but the way they played was 4-4-2, but when we didn't have possession, I would just drop off Big Smudger. So in a kind of like number 10 position, but the highlights of that are obviously the win at Parkhead, considering the team that they had, or proved that they had, because they won the league that year. to go to Parkhead and pretty much dominate them. The chances that we had, it could have been 4-5-1. Easy. And I think I missed a couple of sitters as well as scoring, eh? But yeah, I got injured in that game, and it just, as I say, it was stop-start. But ultimately, the main aim was to stay in the league, which we did pretty comfortably in the end, I believe.
Yeah, finished fifth that season.
I wasn't sure. I was going to say top six, Mikey, but it was a lot of hard graft, a lot of hard work, because ultimately any team coming up is going to find it hard, albeit usually in the second year. A team coming up, because no one knows that much about them. Maybe the players, they maybe, I'm not saying underestimate them, but maybe don't know how to play against them. So to finish fifth after coming up from the first division was great credit to the management and to the boys again, eh? But from myself, I mean, I don't know how many games I played that season. I mean, all in all, I think I played about 60 games, Mikey. Now that's starts and sub appearances. So
you played 12 that season.
12, there you go. Yeah. So that maybe indicates that I'm trying to think of the injuries that year. I can't. I mean, I obviously remember the injury. It finished me in the championship season, because I think it was a cup game against St Mirren at East End. It was Paul Fennick, actually. Just an obvious clash with thighs. Eventually, got a scan done and stretched my cruciate and didn't need surgery. It was just rest. And unfortunately for myself, it meant that was me till pre-season. But I was fully fit for the start of the season and did well pre-season, hence why I kind of started up front with Big Andy. And I'm not sure where I got injured into the season, but it wasn't, as I say, enjoying my time there, Mikey, but it wasn't as successful from a personal point of view that I would have hoped, and that's ultimately down to me. But I think injuries played a part, but that's not the excuse that it just didn't happen for me there, as we would have hoped it would have.
Well, one game you just spoke about there was the following season, 97-98, and it was at Celtic Park. A 2-1-1, the game you're on about.
Aye. Oh, sorry, I'm getting ahead of myself there. Sorry.
No, not at all. What's your memories of that day?
I just thought that we played absolutely first class. Even before they got that penalty that I'm not sure was a penalty. I should have had the penalty at the other end, because Jonathan Gould cleaned me out and they got a bye kick. And I think did I hit the post, I hit the bar. I think Stuart missed a couple of chances. But I think on the day, even the most fervent Celtic fans couldn't begrudge us the one, and to get the goals, obviously a special feeling, eh? And I agree, because they didn't happen that often. And as you say, they didn't happen that often at Ibrox, as your that Mr. Leishman will tell you. He's quite happy to talk about the last person to win at Ibrox. But no, I think it was a great result, and it was merited because we played particularly well that day as a team, which is not easy to do these places.
Definitely. That was a good season for you. You played 35 games that season and scored 6 goals. Your last game was against Celtic as well, the famous Craig Falconbridge game.
Oh, the 1-1.
Yeah, the 1-1.
They won, and they would have won the league, and then Falky came on.
Yeah.
Off the bench and scored the equaliser.
Yeah, what's your memories of that one?
No, did I start that game, Mikey?
You came off the bench.
I was going to say, but it's always... it's funny because when I was warming up, and I think obviously Celtic fans had a lot of the ground, but they were interspersed in even the enclosure bits to the left of the dugout. Obviously back then it was standing, and jogging up and down there when you're warming up, there was a few shouts saying, "Kim, give us a Celtic song and that. Give us the Soldier song and that." Because obviously I used to go and watch Celtic before I started playing football, so there was obviously a few Celtic fans from the Dunfermline area in there that knew my allegiances. So, but it was a bit surreal because kind of it's got to spoil the party for Celtic obviously for a week. You just needed 3 points to win, and then they had a home game to come with St Johnstone, and ultimately they won. So I think most in the ground thought that they were going to do it because the goal came pretty late in the game. But again, I thought the team played well that day, and when Celtic were on the crest of a wave, with the run that they'd been on, and the fact that they were playing for the championship that day, that most people thought, they'll just roll up at East End Park, win the game, and then that'll be it. But unfortunately, we had other matters, and as I say, on the day, I'm saying we justified getting a point, but I thought we matched them for long periods of the game, hence why the score was only 1-0 at the time. And anybody will tell you at 1-0 you're never safe.
No, that's it. So that kind of brought the curtain down on your time at Dunfermline. But a few things I wanted to ask you. What was your memories of working beside Burton, Dick? Obviously, you've touched on the real family club and togetherness that they created. And
brilliant, because obviously Bert's brother, Dick's brother Pink was there as well. Mostly during pre-season, that was like Pink's sort of bag. It was the pre-season stuff. But I mean, Dick was brilliant with the boys because he was like the buffer between the manager. But Bert was really good. He wasn't standoffish like some managers could be. He would have a laugh and a joke with the players and that as well. But Dick was obviously took most of the training sort of Monday to Friday, and he used to rip the boys to pieces. Obviously, he's a very good after-dinner speaker. He probably honed it in the training ground back in the days, and a multitude of stories. But I think you can see with the career that he's had that he's a total football man. He's great at sort of building teams and he can work hand in hand. He did it brilliantly with Bert. But I love my time there from a group perspective. I just wished from a personal perspective that I'd had more of an impact, because as I say, I wanted to sign for the club because I was a Dunfermline boy, but just through poor form, injuries, which can happen to anybody, but ultimately the burden of responsibility lies with me. And as I say, that's probably, I got offered a new contract. I just thought it was time to try something else, just to see if I could sort of reignite my career. But I left on great terms. And fun enough, one of the first people I spoke to at the Carnegie Conference Centre was Paul DeMello, and I hadn't seen Paul in a long, long time. And he was obviously the gentleman that dealt with the contracts and that. So it was good to catch up with him. And as I say, there was nothing that the club could have done. I just wanted to try something different, and that was my reason for leaving.
Did you find there was more pressure on you being a local boy?
Well, it's funny because my mum's brother, Uncle Michael, still watches Dunfermline, and I always remember speaking to him, and he always stuck up for me in the crowd, But I wasn't aware of it, Mikey. And as I say, it's part and parcel, every fans have favourites, every fans have players that they make the scapegoat, whether that's because somebody's local or no. I don't think so, because Tory's local. Tory was brilliant for Dunfermline. Nipper's fairly local. I didn't get off to the best start, and that's down to me. That's nobody else. And once you're trying to win over the fans, it's difficult. But did I get maybe a bit undue stick? Possibly. As I say, did it harm me? No, really. It's water off a duck's back, and ultimately, punters pay their money, they can keep stick as long as it's sensible and it's no personal and it's no vicious. You can have a go at a player, But Uncle Michael had a few choice words with Mikey Barty. I know you've got my Uncle Michael, but he's had a few words with a few punters over the years. But it is what it is. It's not the end of the world. Somebody giving you a bit of stick, It's when the opposing fans don't give you stick, you're in trouble.
We hope you're enjoying this episode of Walking Down the Halbeath Road. We would also like to thank our sponsors at Inverkeithing Hillfield Swifts 2017s. The Swifts are an SFA quality marked community group and have competitive teams for every age group from mini kickers through to amateur level football. So if you're interested in youth football, why not check out their website, www.swiftsfc.com.
So you left Dunfermline and you signed for Ray Stewart at Livingston.
Yes.
Tell us about how that come about. Obviously, you got offered a contract at Dunfermline, but chose not to sign it. So, was there other clubs interested as well? Or?
I'm trying to think. Possibly, I can't remember offhand, Mikey, but I remember Leash contacting me because Jim was at Livingston at the time, and he'd said to me about Dominic Keane taking over. Could we meet up? And I had a chat with Jim. He'll say to you that he was camped outside my house. Nonsense, He phoned me, and I met him, and I met with Dominic. And they told me about the plans to they appointed Raymond Stewart. Now, I'd worked with Raymond latterly before I left St Johnstone because they brought Raymond in when he left, I think it was West Ham, as a player coach. And he then started working with the younger players in the afternoon. And I loved his coaching. It was fresh and it was new. Everything was ball orientated. And I was keen to work with him. And the club were always trying to bring in John Robertson as a player coach as well. Now, I didn't know John apart from playing against him in games, but always thought he was a real decent guy, very approachable and that. And I thought, well, why not? So I spoke to Jim and he told me the plans for the club. I think they just missed out. They started in promotion place on the last game of the season, but because of the results, they stayed in the second division. So he said, look beyond this season. We're a year behind because we had planned to be in the first division. And then they said that we're going to invest heavily in the squad with players, which they did. And it just worked for me. Maybe I found a home. I got off to a good start with the club. I scored a few goals. The training was really good. The fans seemed to take to me as well, which I think goes hand in hand if you're playing well and you're scoring goals and the club's doing well. And it just sort of snowballed from there, Mikey.
Brilliant. And again, you won promotion. Your first season there, you won the second division.
Yeah, what a season, because it culminated in, it came down to between us and Cali. And I'm pretty certain we were level on points and they came down to us in the second last game of the season. And it was when, I'm trying to think, it was just the two stands. Was it the main stand and the one where the house, the away fans? Possibly.
Yeah,
it was
behind the goals.
Yeah, it was like maybe 5,000. It was absolutely rammed. And Cali had a fantastic support doing. And I mean, what a game. I think we're 4-0 up inside 20 minutes. And then my big mucker, Big Bobby, he headed my head to header the ball. And that was the end of my game, just before half time. And then you're hearing noises and I'm thinking, 5-0. Come in, and it was either 4-1 or 4-2. They've got to go back. But we managed to hang on, and it meant that we only needed a point, ironically enough, up at Forfar, our last game of the season, to win the league. But I'm pretty certain that I scored that day, we won. And it was brilliant. It was just a great end to the season. And I think it sort of justified my reason for going, because we're now going into the championship, and the club would invest again and bring in a better quality player to try and see if we could make that jump. So it was a great season. And I can't remember if I got Player of the Year that year as well. If it wasn't that year, it might have been the following year. Livingston. I'm trying to think, Mikey, because it was the old second division. I might have missed out that year.
You played 36 and scored 14. 15 in that first season.
And one of the highlights of that day was playing up front with Rob. Had a couple of games with John before he hung the boots up. And ironically, I think one of the last games was away. No, sorry, that was the following season, because we played Falkirk. Yeah. So you're still playing into because we played one game at Falkirk. Next year we'll come on to that, and it was quite poignant, which I'll speak to you about later. But it was a great season because it justified moving, and from there the club just exploded. And I think ultimately it took us 2 years to win the championship. But again, the championship was a very strong league that year. I think it was St Mirren that went up.
It was, yeah. Dunfermline went up second.
Did they? Right. So Dunfermline was who was the manager at Dunfermline at the time? Was that
Jimmy Calderwood? We only went up because the SPL increased to the 12 teams from 10.
That's right. Because I think even Falkirk had a good side. The Rovers had a good side as well. It was a real competitive league, which was great. Because it meant every game meant something. But that season was great. I wasn't sure. I knew it was 13 or 14 goals that I scored, but that's what you want to do. I played 36 games. I was an integral part. It was like going back to my Forfar days, Mikey, where I was playing week in, week out. Whereas at Dunfermline, it was stop-start, a bit like St Johnstone, but for different reasons. It's St Johnstone. I was a younger boy at Dunfermline. Injury, poor form meant I was sort of subbed more than I wanted, more than I played, I should say. But going to Livingston, I think, as I say, it justified the reason for me going, and it meant I was back playing in the championship the following season.
It must have been quite an exciting club at the time, because there were so much progress going on under Jim, and the stadium was constantly getting developed. The crowds were going up. The type of players that were coming in, like you say, must have been really exciting.
It was, and as you see, you're just when you look back, you think you're just thankful that you were one of the players that they wanted to keep. Because every season I was there, players come and gone. But I was able to either sort of do enough to warrant staying there, with my performances, which is obviously great as well. But it can work for or against you. Ultimately, if you want to get to the top league, you need to improve the squad and you need to bring in players that are going to be able to take you there. It's tinged with certain boys not getting the opportunity to see if they can play at the next level, but unfortunately in football, it's a business and it's ruthless. It's ruthless, and that's maybe the negative side to it. But ultimately, somebody's investing money in a club. They want to get to here. They're going to get there. They're not going to bother about who's at the club. They're going to get the best players to get them there in the shortest possible time. And Livingston is no different to any other club in that respect.
Yeah, and that season 99-2000, Ray Stewart lost his job, even though you guys were doing pretty good. And Big Leash comes in. What was it like working with Big Jim?
Oh, I think larger than life. But Jim was great, and he was fortunate because he had Davy beside him, and Davy was a total football man, and then they had John Robertson as well. By that time, Robbo had taken the decision to hang the boots up and concentrate on his coaching, which I think was the right thing for him to do. I think he just knew, but he would do a lot of the coaching, and Davy did the rest. They would maybe the more sort of tactical side of it, and Jim would just be watching for the side with the mobile phone, But it was a good team and it worked, and ultimately it did take us a bit to get over the line. I thought at the time it was maybe a bit harsh on Raymond because it was not as if we were sitting down the bottom, but again, the club heavily invested in playing staff, and if it's not working, how long do you leave it? And that's just the nature of the beast, Mikey. They're no different to other clubs that have probably can let managers go for just as seemingly as less. And it is tough, and it's one of the things you think, well, just why would you do that, Joe? But if it's in your blood, it's in your blood, But I think Raymond went on to do good stuff at Stirling Albion after that as well. But the team worked, and John, Davy and Big Jim were a great sort of set up for the boys, It was probably the purple patch of my time there. So the name coming into the following season when we won the championship to then going up to the Premier League. So I was able to sort of still be a mainstay of the team alongside the players that they brought in, and guys, they brought in a few.
I was going to say that season 2000-2001, like you say, you win promotion again, back to the Premier League. You played 45 and scored 20 goals. And then the following season, your first season in the SPL, you finished third and get into Europe. It's an absolute fairy tale, isn't it?
It's. I think you think to yourself, will it happen again, Mikey? It's highly unlikely. I think what was in Livingston's favour is they had the finances to reinvest. I think they've done some great work in the season in the championship by bringing in Big Marvin, Stevie Tosh, Alec Burns, playing Rafe Rovers. They went to Falkirk and bring in Davy Hagan, God rest him, Crabbo, and Marine O'Keefe. And then we went up north and brought in Barry Wilson, David Zauser, and Mark McCulloch. Strengthening us, unbelievable strength in that squad, but it weakens your rivals, and all the boys played an integral part. But what sort of probably the ace in the pack was bringing in Fernandez and Broto as well from Airdrie, who turned out to be one who was just probably is the best keeper I played with. And Fernandez is, if he's not the best player I played with, he's certainly in the top three. And that's the difference. You had players like that. And then when we go into the Premier League, again, there's another turnover. Gary Bowen comes in, Nathan Lowndes comes in for St Johnstone, Philippe Brancoin, Frenchman, comes in. Tino comes in from, I think, Malaga or something like that. And then Rubio comes in, ex-Real Madrid. A couple of other Spanish boys or South American. And it just showed you the ambition. And maybe it's too ambitious, but it didn't happen by accident. They wanted to they weren't happy with just finishing 11th or 10th. They wanted to finish as high up. And if you look at, going back to the Dunfermline days, we were able to finish 5th. We had a bloody good squad that year as well. But to go and finish 3rd. And at the time, we had a tough start. I think we played Hearts at home, Rangers away, I want to say Kelly away, and Celtic at home. And I thought, God almighty, but we beat Hearts 4 times that year. And they had likes of Craig Gordon, Robbie Nielsen, Presley, Colin Cameron. I'm not sure if Paul Hartley was it. It was a top Hearts team, It wasn't a sort of Mickey Mouse team. And to beat them 4 times was brilliant, culminating in the end of the season, winning at Tynecastle to cement 3rd. But we beat Hearts, we drew with Rangers. I hit the post in 87 minutes where I head up to win it or to put us 1 up. And then I think we beat Kilmarnock 5-1 down there. I scored after we lost the first goal. And then we drew 0-0 with Celtic, just prior to them going out to Amsterdam for the second leg, where they won 3-1 over there. Gary Bowen sent off after maybe 60 minutes. Bro saves Larsson's penalty, and we get a 0-0. And you're thinking, we could do something here, even at that early stage, because we brought in Stuart Lovell with Hibs as well, who is probably as good a captain I've worked under as anybody. But again, at that stage, I think, well, it's only 4 games in. A lot can happen. But as the season progressed and the results kept coming in, and I think invariably we had slip-ups along the way, but we were always good at bouncing back. I think we had a couple of good performances up at Aberdeen, and one in the Cup and one in the league. But ultimately, to me, you finish in the league where you deserve to finish, There's no fluke over 38 games or 36 games or whatever it was. But it was just such an achievement for a provincial club, sort of fairly new club, to achieve something like that, and then to go on into playing in Europe, the following season. But brilliant times there.
So like you say, the following season, you then get your taste of playing in Europe in the UEFA Cup against Vaduz and Sturm Graz. What's your memories of playing in these games?
My memories was we played away in Vaduz. So did I start on the bench both away games, and I started both home games? The first game was, it was such a surreal setting, in Liechtenstein, which I think is within Luxembourg or Switzerland, and I just remember flying in, and it's so picturesque. And then we got to the pitch, and it's like it wasn't playing on a tacky field, but the grass was quite long, and it didn't make for an easy game. But we got a 1-1 draw away from home, and you think, well, regardless, we were absolute novices when it came to sort of Europe as a club and as a player. I hadn't played in Europe before. I wasn't sure how. I think Barry played in Europe with Rovers. Obviously, some of the foreign lads might have done, but wasn't sure. But the second game, we kind of rode our luck. It was 0-0, and they had that at the end where they scored. But everybody had heard the referee's whistle, but it was a hell of a finish. Why he blew, let them take the corner and then blew as the ball was in midair, I'm not too sure, unless he was playing it exactly by the second. But least jokes about Kiernan sort of having a go at their manager. But I think if it happened to us, I think we'd have felt pretty hard done by, but albeit we did hear the whistle, and whether we had switched off or no, it was some finish by the boy. And then on to, was it Graz? No, they weren't the team. They weren't the team that they had been maybe in the 90s. I remember Rangers playing them at Ibrox in the early Champions League. And Christ, even for an Austrian team, they were a good side. And went over there, it was the Arnold Schwarzenegger Stadium. But what a setup! What a setup! And watching them and the first half, and we were 5 down at half time, and I was on the bench. I was quite happy to be on the bench when you seen them. They just overran us, and their movement was so sharp, and they were really quick to penetrate. And this lad playing lefty was just on a different planet. He tore Brian Plant to shreds that night. But he probably tore anybody in the game that he was on. And you're thinking, it's a salvage job, eh? But we knuckled down and got the call at half time, or just after half time to go on. It's not really what you want when you're 5-0 down to go in the park. But we managed to win the second half 2-0, 5-2. So you're thinking, well, at least you've saved face a wee bit, eh? But the second game, I think we had them on the rocks because we were 2-0 up. And we had a chance to go 3-0 up, or to at least have a shot on target. And I think the last pass, and this highlights the difference between maybe Scottish football and continental football, because that last pass in our final third was misplaced. They broke up, and 4 passes later it's 2-1. And you're thinking, so, but then it was a great night because I think it ended up 4-3, and I think it went 3-2 or 3. Did it go 2-2, 3-2, 3-3? And I think Barry scored an absolute worldie to win the game 4-3. So at least you've won the game. It was a great experience, albeit a wee bit shorter than we would have hoped for, But it was my one and only opportunity to play in Europe, apart from maybe going on pre-season, which is not the same. But great experience ultimately. As I say, it was only 2 rounds.
Brilliant. And then 2003, you end up leaving Livingston. What was the reason behind leaving?
Well, I was actually going to leave the year before. It was just over. They'd offered me a new contract, and I think I was 32 at the time, and they offered me a year, and I just wasn't interested. Well, not interested. I just thought I deserved, because I was still relatively young and fit, but whether they were looking at the age. But they'd offered another player just like the same terms as well, and they knocked it back, and I just thought, I'll just explore my options. And I spoke to Paul Cherry at the time, and I think Patrick Thistle were interested, and also I think Yogi at Falkirk had been on the phone as well. Ultimately, I got a call for Jim out the blue, and said he wanted me up again. And ultimately, the lure of playing in Europe made me sign. It was just a 1-year deal, but I got a wee bit extra money. And playing in Europe, I think we struggled both as a club and personally, because it was a second season syndrome for me. We really struggled, and I think we finished 7th or 8th, and maybe 9th. I can't remember what it was. But I thought, well, that'll be my last season, something new. And then I think Robbo had left to take that job at Christmas. And we had a leaving do in Edinburgh, had a couple of drinks and that. And he'd said to me, "You want to come up in the summer?" And I just says, "Well, if I can't stay in the Premier League, I'll give my horse, I'll come up." And at the end of the season, I'd embarked on my B licence. So I was on my way down to Largs, that was it. And I got a phone call, and Ricey Chipper was, Yogi's number 2 at Falkirk. And Ricey had phoned me and said, "Yogi's want to have a chat with you." I said, "That's fine, it's fine." So Yogi phoned me, I was just coming into Largs. And I'd always kind of got on well with John when playing against him. He was no nonsense, but kind of was fair. And he said, "Do you want to come and sign for Falkirk?" And I had that in my mind. Do I want to do that as a Dunfermline boy? Do I need that baggage? But ultimately, I'd said to Yogi, I gave Robbo my word if I couldn't stay in the Premier League. Plus, Robbo took Donald Park as his assistant. And having played alongside Stuart Lovell, he actually had worked under Parky at Hibs. And spoke about him in glowing terms, and the fact that I was embarking on my coaching badges, I thought it would benefit me playing under Robbo and with Parky alongside. We sort of maybe garner any knowledge and learn how to coaching points off him. So I said to Yogi, I said, I'd signed, I said I'd give my word to Robbo, and then I want to go back on it. And he says, "That wee jambo bastard." You know what I mean? Being a big Hibs man, but he's only joking, But he understood my reasons, And I'd shared a room in Magluf a couple of years with Chipper on the end of season tours, and I'd got to know him. And Ricey is a good coach as well, as he's proven at a number of clubs. So I took the decision to go up there, but ultimately I couldn't move up permanently. My wife had went back to college after having my son. So that was 2003, Mikey, I think,
Yeah, 2003, 2004.
And it was around about that time we noticed there was issues with my son's sort of development. So it transpired, obviously, the following year he was diagnosed with autism. But we didn't know that at that time. So what I'd spoke with John and explained, and he knew my family, he knew my wife and that. So I says, "I'll come up." And what he did, he gave me at 30, I think it's coming up 33, he gave me a 3-year contract, which is unheard of, at that age, and it gave me a bit of security. So I stayed up there in a house with Parky and a couple of young lads that they brought in from Hibs, but we're usually off on the Wednesday. So after Tuesday, we'd come down the road, and then I would go back up the road on a Thursday morning. I'd leave really early, stop off at Ballinluig for about an hour's kip, and then finish my journey up the road. But what was good on the Monday, we didn't normally train till midday, because a lot of the boys went home after a game. If it was at home, because a lot of the boys were Central Belt, so everybody would travel up when we train, and because a number of the guys that were for Central Belt stayed in the house as well. So it was a really good sort of team spirit. And then in November of that year, we were really struggling. As I say, it was affecting my wife because I was away most of the week. So I had a chat with John and explained the issues we were having with Jack, my lad. And I says, "I'm going to maybe have to look for something closer to home. How would you feel about sort of terminating the contract?" And he says, "I understand. I said, I'm not wanting you to go." I says, "Can we maybe work something out?" And I said, "What do you have in mind?" And I think at the time, Alan Preston was the manager at Livingston. John said, "What if you train down there a Monday and a Tuesday, usually off a Wednesday, and then you come up on a Thursday, train Friday. If we're at home, stay. But if we're away from home, everybody goes, or the South Base boys just go home. And I was like, well, that'd be great. I said, I didn't want to leave. I was enjoying my time. And we were getting wee bits of sort of warm-ups and training to do, the senior players. I was getting on great with the guys. I was enjoying my football. The coaching was good. I could see potentially something happening that season. And I just said, well, that would be brilliant, Rob says. And this we spoke about at the start, Mike, about there's so much man management in football. And this has stuck with me. And it's almost 20 years ago. I says, what the rest of the players will think about that? He says, if you're happy off the park, he says, we're going to get the benefit on the park. And it's so true. He says, let me worry about the players. The players were brilliant because they understood. I didn't tell them about my family situation, but they just knew that there was an issue. And they were, well, nobody said it to my face, but they understood the reason. And it meant that on a Monday, I would train through it. And Biscuit said to me, he says, do you want to train with the first team? I says, no, I'll come and train with the young boys. Because you had the likes of Snodgrass, Dorrans, Jimmy Scott, Gary Irvine, Scott Boyd. I thoroughly enjoyed my time. And I think it was Billy Kirkwood who was coaching them. And I got a couple of wee sessions to do as well with Billy. And I thoroughly enjoyed it. And that meant that I was away and I was home for helping out with my laddies. So they trained at about 9:30 at Livingston. And then I would leave the house at 6 on a Thursday morning. And I would stop off at Ballinlough at about 7:30. I'd have an hour with the balaclava doing, sort of just sleep, set my alarm. So I was leaving at 8:30 and I was up for about 9:45. And I would stay Thursday, Friday, we were at home. And it worked because it was as good a season as I've enjoyed,
Yeah.
And ultimately, if things had been differently, I would have stayed. But the fact that the club got up and moved to Aberdeen, it was just moving the issue of travelling, because I would have still had to travel up to Aberdeen, up to Inverness. And at that time, there was no point in my wife moving, because I think the nearest university was Aberdeen. And ultimately, there was no guarantee my son would get the same services in a different local authority to what he got. And that was more important than my football.
Of course.
But Rob understood that. And that's obviously how I went on to the Gretna. But the last day when we beat St Johnstone to win the league won't stay with me. It's as memorable as most last days of the season, because it was still up for grabs, and we'd won down at Clyde the week before. We had to win because I think they were ahead of us by a point. John Nobotham gave them a penalty that never was, and we came back and won it 2-1, and it took it into the last game where it was in our favour. And because it was such a big crowd, I think we were getting kicked off a few minutes late, or say maybe 5-6 minutes late. By that time, Clyde were already 3-up down at Brecon. So we knew we had to win. To get the first goal was great, and it settled us. But ultimately, we lost an equaliser. We were actually telling the boy to shoot, and then the rifles went for about 25 yards, 1-1. But it was a great second half, and I think we thoroughly deserved to win the game because we were the best team that year. And I look back, actually, we lost about either 8 or 9 games that year, which for a team winning the league doesn't happen very often. But the sign of a good team is we backed it up with a win after every game. We never, from memory, we never lost 2 games on the spin. And it was a fantastic achievement for the club as well to get to the Premier League. Of course. Fond memories, albeit it was a very short time up there.
Yeah, but another promotion in the bag for you before you join Brooks Mileson's Revolution down at Gretna. What was it like at Gretna? Again, it must have been quite an exciting time. The club were climbing the leagues, and the money getting put in.
It actually, I think the seeds were sown at the start of my year at St Johnstone, because we actually drew them in the Challenge Cup. So we travelled down, and I think the boys stayed somewhere. I travelled down with Parky, because Parky stays in Edinburgh, and we'd driven the car down to, I think we got the bus at Lockerbie, and then we just followed the bus in. We got the bus into Radio. And I remember we were there with shell suits, shell suit Bob for sort of River City, man. And walking in, and you see all these boys are sort of Italian suits for the shades and the brogues and that. I'm like, fucking hell, what's going on here? And obviously thought they were the dog's bollocks, eh? And there was 1 or 2 players, because Martin Cameron was there, and Martin played with Allo when I was at Forfar, and he was a terrific striker. He got moved down to Bristol Rovers. I think they paid about 150 grand for him, And we absolutely destroyed them that day. I mean, it was 5, it could have been 10. I mean, I've chipped the keeper with my right foot for about 25 yards for one of the goals. It was just everything we tried came off. And we went in at the end, and I remember Brooks shaking my hand, saying, well done, brilliant, brilliant. And I remember hearing, I think it was Rowan Alexander, absolutely caning them. And I was like, well, there's nothing they could have done. They were just beaten by a far, far better side. You know, they weren't poor by any way. We were just on our game. So I got a phone call. It was immediately after the St Johnstone game. In fact, coming off the park for the St Johnstone game, John Connolly was the manager of St Johnstone, and shaking all the boys' hands, saying well done, because obviously we won the league. He says to me, what are you doing next year? And I says, it's no time for that, John. I said, I'm going to enjoy getting this, because my wife and my daughter had come up for the game, So I said, I'm going to enjoy tonight. I said, there's plenty of time to think about my future, but I'd not really any serious sort of thoughts of going back to St Johnstone, albeit it had been a number of years since I'd been there. And then Paul Cherry, it says Brooks Mileson's on the phone, want to see if you go down. I thought, why? And it's one of them, Mike, it's purely solely was money, and I'd make no qualms about it, because when I went to Inverness, I took a huge pay cut, and I could have got more probably at Falkirk, but it wasn't about the money. I wanted to work under John and Parky, and John gave me the best deal that he could have given me up there. And as I say, the money wasn't a factor, you know, or I would have went somewhere else. But I went primarily because they offered me a 3-year deal on more money than I was getting at Inverness. And I thought, well, probably the last contract I'll sign. Why not? You know, and albeit I went down and spoke to Brooks, and I got on really well with him. He was this larger-than-life character that everybody sort of saw. He just had massive ambitions and plans for the town or for the club. And looking back, I mean, there was only so much he could have done, because it's only a small place. It's akin to I'm not even sure it's as big as Dingwall, you know, but there was only so much he could have did. But everybody jumped on this bandwagon, and it was great while it lasted, you know. But ultimately, it was in hindsight, it was doomed to fail at some point, you know, because the money ran out, you know. But as being part of it was great to get swept along with it, you know. But ultimately, how it ended was it left a bit of a sour taste there.
Yeah, you won 3 more promotions at Gretna. And obviously, talking about Brooks Mileson, he was quite an eccentric character. Have you got any funny stories from your time there?
Yeah, well, when I went down and I agreed to sign, Rowan Alexander showed me around the training ground in the park. Eventually we met up with Brooks, and I travelled in with Paul Cherry, and when I'd agreed to sign, the club had agreed to give me use of a car when I came down. So I signed, and then once I'd signed the contract, took me along and did a couple of photos with Brooks and that. And I was actually going, I think I was going to America in the summer with my family. So I was due back maybe a couple of days later to the rest of the boys. And I'm just thinking, I checked on and said, so the car will be there when I come back? He says, aye. And I'm thinking, how am I going to get done? Because at that time, I wasn't sure who was going to be signing, so I wasn't sure I would be someone to travel with. I said, well, I'm not want to bring my car down, Brooks, and then have to leave it here and take the club car. And he just, as a matter of fact, just throw me these keys. I'll just take that and just bring it back when you come down for pre-season. And he had a classic Jag, 2-seater. And that's what it was. I didn't know. I went inside. He just outside, told me where it was. And I was like, cheeky. I thought, are you sure? I went back in. And I turned the ignition on. I just said, there's no petrol on it, Brooks. And he just went in his wallet, brought out his 350s, and he's just going to fill it up.
Brilliant.
So again, I maybe told you the type of man. I mean, he was generous to a fault, probably too generous in the way that he rewarded players. You know, some that he wasn't sure if they could play the league that they were going into, but he would reward them with extensions to contracts. And ultimately, in hindsight, probably would do the same again. It probably wasn't the correct way to run a football club, you know. And he was a successful businessman. He'd made many businesses, and he'd made a lot of money. So Kenny was an intelligent man, but maybe he get caught up in the fairy tale and just wanting to get to, and he got the club to the Premier League. So all said and done, I played the majority of the first season, Mikey. The second season, in the November is when I got struck down with chronic fatigue, and that kind of finished that season. So I played up into November, so maybe about a dozen, 15, 16 games. I'm not sure what the records say. Hardly played at all in the championship winning seasons. I don't really count that. You know, I played enough games when we won the second division. I played a bit like Dunfermline, I scraped over the line, you know. But I don't count anything towards the championship winning season, albeit delighted for Ken, the boys. It was a great achievement, and Ken going down to the last day in Dingwall and Jamesy Grady scoring Ken the late winner.
Yeah.
I think it was Hamilton that beat. It was great for the club, you know, and great for Brooks because he'd invested a lot of money and a lot of time and effort into that club, and Ken, he deserved it. He deserved that moment, eh? And then to latterly get them to the Scottish Cup final was just a couple of penalty kicks, a fairy tale ending, eh? You know,
it was very close.
Yeah, it is what it was. Yeah, but no, it was a great time there. But ultimately, I think it was doomed to end how it did.
Yeah, obviously it had financial difficulties, like you just said. So was that a hard time for you, or was it quite an easy decision at that point to think it's time for me to go here?
It was. Well, when it happened, Mikey, I'd spent a great time at Airdrie. At Stirling Albion on loan when Murray was the manager. I'd come back. That was in November, say 2005 or 2006. I can't remember. And it was the rest of that season. I knew I wasn't going to play in the Scottish Cup final that season, but I went along and my wife and I were at the game, sat in the stand, and the club had obviously booked a hotel reception for the players and wives, and that we were included, but I think I left early with my wife because it's see if you're not playing, it's not the same. As delighted I was for the achievement of the club, if you're not playing, it's not the same. And I felt like an outsider looking in. And I just went, I think we just went back to our room that night. But I kind of mind when I started back playing, but I was so far out the picture. I wasn't that bothered if I didn't play football again, to be truthful, Mikey. I was just wanting some level of fitness because my kids were still relatively young, and I just wanted to be able to spend time with them. And if my career finished. It was going to finish at some point. But then Murray phoned me and he said, "Do you want to come here on loan?" And that was I played a couple of games. I played once at St Johnstone, and then that was in the January. I think it was maybe in the February or March a particular season. So Dunfermline Albion were going for promotion in League Two, League One, I beg your pardon, and we ended up going up through the playoffs. And Murray phoned me, "Do you want to come here on loan?" And I loved it. Now, I didn't play every week, but if I didn't start, I was coming off the bench, and we went up with Snoddy was there on loan. I think he was in last chance saloon at Livingston before he went down to Leeds. We had a good team, some really good lads there. Murray got on brilliant with the boys. Mark McNally was his assistant. I just felt to be brilliant to be part of it again. And I thanked Murray when I left. I said I loved my time. And then I went back to Gretna for the start of the next season. I wasn't going to play. And then by that time, Stevie Tosh, he had fallen out with the club and he'd moved on to Queen of the South. I think Gordon Chisholm was the manager, but Kenny Brannigan and wee Billy Dodds had come in to help. And Chisholm phoned me, says, "You want to come on loan?" Just says, "No making any promises." I says, "Aye." I says, "I can't have any worse than what I'm not going to play here." And as I say, I wasn't particularly bothered. And I went on loan to Christmas, and I enjoyed it. Great. We trained in Glasgow. Again, another good set of boys. I didn't play every week. I wasn't expecting to play every week. I just great to be involved and have a chance of playing. And then the contract was up in December. And then Danny Lennon was at Cowdenbeath, manager with Big Brian Wells. So I went there just to play. But then there was rumours of money not getting paid or being late, wages and that. And that was in either the February 2008 maybe or 7. And then eventually it went sort of tits up. And I could have stayed at Cowdenbeath to the end of the season, but I wasn't enjoying it. And they would have been contracted to pay X amount of my wages to the end of the season. And it was around about Easter time, that's right, because my wife, her dad and the 2 kids had went to Florida in Easter. And it was just before then. And when I heard there was rumblings there, I was keeping an eye on flights to America. And then it went tits up, the club liquidised it. And I just booked the first flight to Florida for a week. And I thought, you know what, I'll worry about finding a club when I come back. It'll be here when I come back. So it was, and as I say, you felt for all the office staff and that as well. Everybody got hit in the pocket, Mikey, and it's happened to other clubs before and subsequently. There isn't any winners, it leaves a bad taste in your mouth, but it's life. Can you let it consume you? You've got to move on. And eventually I did. I got into coaching, Tynecastle. I just had a phone call out the blue with Douglas Dalglish, who was the club secretary, and he was the secretary when I played with Salvation all the years back, and he was still involved with Tynecastle. And it gave me my first steps into coaching. But, I mean, as I say, I don't regret going to Gretna. It was good at the time, but my health obviously played a massive part in when my career finished, because I think I'm still quite slight, and if I hadn't been for the illness, I could have played longer, and still contributed. I was still fairly fit and healthy. It's just one of these things that it was been lying dormant in me, and something's triggered it. Don't know what it is. It is what it is, and it'll be there till the day I pop my clogs. But you learn to live with it. You manage your diet, you manage your exercise. I'm not as fit as I was, but who is it? I'm coming up 50, 52 this year. We slow down at some point. It's just, I think what I always say, if it happened to me at 23, there might have been a lot more bitterness. But at 33, I had a great career. I'd been fortunate with injuries. I played in some terrific sides, been part of some great championship winning sides, had more great memories than sort of not so good memories. So there wasn't a lot to be sorry for, and there's no point in being bitter about something that you've got no control over. It was just about matter of getting on with life and being there for the kids and my wife.
Brilliant, mate. And what is it David Bingham's up to these days? Obviously, you've finished playing football now, and
I stepped away from the game, Mikey. I was at the last club I was at was Selkirk in East of Scotland, and I enjoyed it in Lowland League. Sorry, my mate Ian Fergus, both our daughters, both Chloe's, had started school at the same time, and that's how we got to know each other. And Ian's probably, if he's not the best youth coach that I've worked with or watched, he certainly can up there. And we've worked together. We worked together at Dunfermline under 17s with the likes of Sean Burton back in the day, just for a year. But I think Stephen Wright came in, and we earmarked a number of players that we thought would benefit the club, but whether he wanted to make his own judgment on that. So we left. So we'd worked up at Lochend Boys Club, and I did bits and pieces. And so he asked me, after I finished up at Whitehall, he asked me if I would come in as number 2. And I said, well, that's perfect. I've got no ambition to be a manager again. So I enjoyed it doing there. Very similar in how it went with Gretna, money, then no money. So I stepped away. Ian went back for a spell, but by that time my son was leaving school, and I was leaving special education into a day service, and it wasn't looking great. There wasn't a lot out there, and I work in sort of independent living. I support adults with autism, so I know how restricted they are for choice after leaving school. So it's a big concern, but fortunately it's worked out, and I chose actively not to get back involved because of sort of being there for my son. And you know what, I've just not missed it enough, mate. There has been times where I thought, come on, is it? And I thought, no, really. My wife's now part-time, she's a part-time teacher, so we're both off on a Friday, so when my son's away at his day service, so we can spend a bit of time in different rooms together, or in different cities together. But it's just having that, you know what, I didn't need to go out on a Tuesday or Thursday. When I did it, I have to say, Mikey, I've only been involved in sort of East of Scotland or Lowland League. I've always had great boys that I've bought into what I've been trying to introduce, and a lot of them keep in touch. So I have enjoyed it. It's not that it is time consuming, and to prepare sessions, and then you're let down with somebody genuinely can't make it because you're overtime at work. You're just thinking, now do you get, do I need that? And then if it's consuming you to that level, at East of Scotland or Lowland League, what's it going to be like if you were to go into even League 2 or League 1? And I thought, I value my time more. And I'm hoping my young nephew has signed up with his Fife, my sister's youngest. So I'm kind of hoping I'll get an opportunity to go and see him next year in League 2. And that'll mean a great deal to me as well, just to see the next batch of, well, he's not a Bingham, but, of that family, to see how he's getting on. I've just not had a chance to see much of him. But hopefully he can have a career similar in length to myself. Work-wise, as I say, I'm a support worker. I've been there, I think I'm coming up 11 years in June, mate. So I enjoy it, and the one thing it allows you to put your own life in perspective, mate. You know, when you think you've got problems, you've not really.
Yeah.
You know, you've got your health, and you've got your family's health, and you've got a roof over your head, and you can make choices for yourself. That's all you need in life, you know. And the guys I support, I've watched them for their early 20s into their early 30s, and to see them achieving things, it means as much to me as watching my son achieve something. That's why I'm still there. You know, it's certainly not the best paid job, but it's no for the money. It's to actively try to make a difference to someone who's not got the same ability as yourself. To give them opportunities to fulfil their life to the best that they can, you know, and to do simple things like go shopping or go 10-pin bowling, you know, and be independent in the house. You know, it's things that my son will face in the future. It's a job that I enjoy. It's hard, you know. I'm not going to. And the older you get, the more you feel it, because I do long shifts. But ultimately, I wouldn't be there if I didn't enjoy it. And as long as my health keeps up, mate, I see myself being there maybe 5, 6, 7 years until my legs and my body tells me that I can't do it anymore. Hopefully, by that time, my nephew will be certainly stop at Park Cairn, or maybe get one of his season tickets. You know?
Fingers crossed, mate. Now that's brilliant to hear that. Fair play, David. Just before we finish, we always do a top 5
yes,
with our former players. So speaking about their time at Dunfermline, so the most memorable game you played in?
But personally, it has to be the game at Park Cairn. Now, it probably would have been different if I'd been part of the players that played against Airdrie because of what was at stake. But as I said earlier, it's not often provincial teams go to Parkhead or Ibrox and compete like that, get a draw, but to win. And it was brilliant because I wasn't sure. It had been a few years since Dunfermline had last been there and won, you know, and as I say, it was just a great experience to score, but ultimately to win as a team, it was fantastic. So that's my personal highlight, you know, as a player.
Mate. Special one. Who was your best mate when you were at the football club?
That was a difficult one, mate, because I said earlier, we had a really, and I think probably because of the tragic circumstances of January when Norrie passed, it galvanised the squad. We had a pretty good bunch of boys because we had numerous nights out organised with the club and some no, and end of season holidays. And I'd like to think I got on with most of the boys. And Ricey was great because I shared the room in the roof with him a couple of years, and I played alongside Flea at Livingston in future years, and Mark Miller as well. But I wouldn't single out anybody in particular. I just thought we were a very good group of boys that had the common goal of trying to win a league, and we all suffered because everybody had time for Norrie and loved the big fella. So we were all impacted, I'd say, equally. Maybe Westy, because Westy had known him a lot longer, and Robbo to that extent. You know, I'd been in squads with Norrie previously, you know, but the boys were about my age and that, who'd come to the club when Norrie was there. We all felt it because he was such a popular figure, But I'd like to think maybe others would disagree, but I think I'd got on with most of the boys.
Brilliant, superb. And who was the best player you played against, would you say? At
my time at Dunfermline?
Yeah. Obviously, you're coming up against the Rangers 9 in a row and a good Celtic team.
I kind of remember playing against Gaza. Maybe I did, but I can't remember. But I remember a reserve game when the Rangers reserves played at Creamery Park in Bathgate, and the first team were away in Russia playing Alania Vladikavkaz, and Gascoigne was suspended, and the rumour was it was going to turn out for the reserves. And it was a 2 o'clock kickoff, and we'd been out for a warm-up back in at about 2:45, 10 to 2. And just getting ready to come out, and this, I'm sure it was an 8 Series BM, just pulled up, just pops the bold one. And Gascoigne just 10 minutes, left the door open, everything, just walked in straight out onto the park and proceeded to run the show in, missed a penalty. I think the game finished 3-3. But so, no, in the first team, I maybe did come up against them, but I'm struggling. Celtic-wise, I'd probably say the likes of Larson. Larson was still new to the club, but same McStay, because he was coming to the end of his time as well. But he was still iconic figure in the Scottish game. And I think at that time was maybe the Canio was playing as well.
Yeah, he was.
We got beaten in the Scottish Cup at East End. I scored that night as well. They beat us 2-1. I'm not sure if he played. That was before his time. It was on Sky Sports. It was live on Sky Sports. It was like a Wednesday night or a Monday night.
Yeah, I do remember that.
But they were the players that stuck out. As I say, I kind of think for the life of me of Gascoigne. I played against Gascoigne in the first team. Maybe I didn't start the games, but I remember coming up against them in the reserves in that game. But there was a lot of good players, and even probably in the Hearts team of that age, you still got Robbo playing for them. You know, there's some great players of that era, for when I played with them for 2 years. So, but predominantly the better ones, as you would imagine, played for Celtic and Rangers, just because of the profile of the clubs.
Of course. And what was the best stadium you played in?
At that time, because Celtic Park wasn't finished, I would probably say it was still a great stadium. You know, I think it was maybe the old Celtic end, which it was a temporary stand that season, I think. And again, but I don't think Ibrox has been filled in. They're still the two iconic stadiums for players of other clubs, So it's boring, but it's probably the honest answer. Both are because a lot of players don't get the opportunity to play, unless you're in the top league, or you draw them in the cup, But certainly nowadays it's a no-brainer. Parkhead's just like on a different planet, The surrounding area as well, but back then it'd probably be one of them, Mikey.
Perfect. And your favourite memory from your time spent at East End Park?
Clinching the title, It has to be. That day, that outpouring, even as soon as Marco put the penalty away, you just knew it was going to be our day, And then it happened at like a blink of an eye with all the celebrations on the park, and then into the dressing room, and then upstairs to receive your medal, and then into the town centre, and just hardly having to put your hand in your pocket. You see what it meant to the whole town. It's like you say, Mike, it galvanised not just the club, but the whole community, the whole town, because everybody knew Norrie. He was a local businessman as much as much as he was the captain of the local football team. And it's just players are only fortunate to be part of that experience very often. And as I say, I've done it at Inverness, but no for the same circumstances, but last day. But that was just, and I was a Dunfermline boy. And however my time went there, I was still part of winning a first division title with my local team. Didn't play as often as I would have liked, but that doesn't take away from the fact I made a contribution, as did other players who maybe didn't play as much. And it's something that you look back on and you still think, what a day. And that was why meeting up again was it brought back some memories, because my memory isn't great. And hearing some of the stories that SP and Mark and me, Murray and that tell, and Dick and Bert, it's brilliant because it jogs memories in your own head.
Mm-hmm.
You've maybe forgot about, I remember that game, and I still can't remember the goals at Cowbowie, but I remember the day. I remember things about the day, the what I'm doing and then speaking to the press, but I can't remember what the goals were like, but I can remember some other goals. I'm never going to forget the goal at Parkhead or things like that. But it was just a brilliant way to finish a season, to obviously nothing to make up for the tragic loss of Norrie, but it galvanised, and it meant that we did something for the big man, as much as we did it for ourselves, and the fans and the club and the whole town. It was just everybody came together, and maybe it was written in the stars, but nobody handed it to the team that year. They had to go and earn it with some big, huge performances.
Yeah, and like you say, at that event a few weeks ago, you could see how much it still means to all you boys. Like such a special time.
Well, I think it goes back to what I said earlier, Mikey, that there's a great bond amongst them. I hadn't seen a number of the boys for years, but it's like I've had reunions with the Inverness boys. I was only there a year, but as soon as you're there, you're right back. It's like you only left kind of 6 months ago. Same with the boys now. I've met Mark and Flea and Mark McCulloch and boys like that, maybe more frequently than say Murray or was it PK, Paul Kinnear and Big Westy. But you just started getting ripped into. He's a big Tory as well, because if you start taking the piss, it's going to get taken the right way, because that's what it was like back in the day. And just because we're older and we're knowing each other's company. Doesn't mean that you can't have that anymore. It just means it's more. I think it means more because the days are few and far between now, because we've all got our own lives to lead. And it's the same with guys that played at other clubs. The reunions are brilliant because it gives you, for that day or for that night, the chance to reminisce on normally a really positive, successful period of your short playing career. Not always, but most of the time. And it's brilliant to reminisce, because that's all we've got now, Mikey, is the memories. And they're the ones that didn't go. The legs go and the ability doesn't go, the brain goes football-wise, but the memories didn't go. And that's what we hold on to. And days like that were brilliant. And I'm delighted that eventually came round. Obviously, it would have been nice on the 25th anniversary, but for COVID. I suffered the same fate with Forfar as well, because we were meant to have a silver anniversary reunion, and hopefully it will still happen. But it was a great day, and as I said, thoroughly enjoy speaking to you again. And it's nice to sort of mull over and reminisce about not just my time at Dunfermline, but other areas of my career as well. It's been great. You've probably got a better recollection than I have nowadays.
A lot of research, Davey, but
well,
fantastic.
That's I wouldn't expect nothing else to somebody as professional as you.
Good man. Well, thanks for doing this, mate. It's been great speaking to you again, and that's been superb.
Well, I look forward to it. Hopefully maybe over again next season, mate, and we'll catch up.
Thank you for listening. Remember to subscribe to this podcast, which is now available on all popular platforms such as Apple iTunes, Spotify, Google Podcasts and YouTube. Thanks to our guest as always in this episode of Walking Down the Halbeath Road. Remember to check out our sponsors in Starnut Apparel and the Swifts 2017s. This podcast was produced by Jan Motkiewicz and music supplied by Stuart Dusty Miller. We look forward to speaking to another part in the next episode. Thank you.